You are listening to the Oneofus.net podcast network. It's the latest episode of Digital Noise, where we will be discussing some of the latest Blu-rays and DVDs, as is our wont. That is kind of what we do. And joining me this week for the second time on the show is John Golson. Hey, John.
Hello, Chris.
How are you?
I'm fine.
We had an interesting mix of movies to talk about this week, didn't we?
Yeah, there were some all kinds of stuff. I would say much stronger films across the board than the last time I was on the show.
There's definitely two in particular on here that I had never seen that are considered to be, classics of a sort that I'm really glad now are in my history of having seen. One of them in particular I'm probably going to rewatch relatively soon.
Tom Cruise's The Mummy.
Yes, Tom Cruise's The Mummy, which I guess, you know what, let's just start with Tom Cruise's The Mummy, which is not the film I will be rewatching soon, although it's one of those... I kind of asked for the Blu-ray for this after seeing the theater, mainly because if they do actually make the next Universal horror movie in this shared universe, I want to have this copy so we can do like a funny commentary mocking track for it. Because this is... It's not like the worst thing we've ever seen, right?
It's watchable.
It's watchable.
It's not good, but it's watchable.
It's not good. And it's not good in such lazy, troubling ways.
Yeah.
Where you're like, wow, look at this budget you've got of this thing. Look at this, like, megastar who's incredibly charismatic. You have in the lead that they don't let do any of the things that we like to see Tom Cruise do in movies.
Well, it's also the first time that I felt like he was cast against his age. I don't think that character works to be as old as Tom Cruise is, where he's like a young, fresh recruit in the military who's also kind of like scamming on the side, and his best friend is like in his late 20s, early 30s, and he's like a charming rogue. And Tom Cruise in this movie looks like he's in his 50s.
Yeah.
Like his age has caught up with him, and that's fine. That's what happens to people.
It was only a matter of time.
That also means you can't play 30 anymore. And I almost felt like the movie would have just improved significantly if they just switched roles. If it was Jake Johnson in the lead, it becomes like a different movie. He's certainly not miscast in that way.
That's true.
But yeah, I felt like this was the first Tom Cruise film I'd ever seen where the casting of Tom Cruise actively worked against the movie.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. And once again, like I said, I think that Tom Cruise being in it comes packaged with certain expectations. And this felt like the sort of movie that would live up to those expectations. But honestly, we're not really sure what is, like we don't really know much about him, except that he doesn't seem like he's a terribly nice guy. He's kind of a thief, really. He doesn't really have much charisma at all. Like, he's certainly not funny. And when he gets into an action situation, he's not really good at that either. So why did you even get Tom Cruise for this part?
They make some, like, fatal flaw choices, too, at the beginning of the movie when he is willing to sacrifice the lives of an entire village of people to get his hands on an artifact.
Right.
It becomes really, even if it's subconscious, it becomes difficult to align yourself to the hero when you see that they don't really care about brown people, like, immediately off the bat.
And, as much as I'm not the world's biggest fan of the Brendan Fraser Mummy films, they're whatever. They're all right. Yeah. But I was craving some tongue-in-cheek goofiness watching this. I was like, come on, guys. This isn't even... It's called The Mummy. It's based on one of the original Universal horror films, and supposedly this is a horror franchise. There ain't no horror in this thing. It's just a mediocre action film,
Yeah, it cribs some little things. Like, the mummies in this sort of look like Walking Dead zombies, and there's like... I don't know if they thought people had just forgotten, but to borrow so liberally from American Werewolf by having his friend who was killed like appear to him and give him advice.
I know, which I'm like, oh God, you did not do that.
Yeah, it was so strange. So even the little things that haven't been in a Mummy movie before were sort of cribbed from other better movies. And it's also weird to see that this is like, you talked about saving it for when they roll out further Dark Universe films. And some of the critical reception apparently has called that into question, where they're not sure if this will be The first of the Dark Universe films.
But they already did that once already.
Dude, they've done it now 4 times.
Is it 4 times?
Van Helsing was supposed to kickstart a Universal Monster franchise and didn't. The Wolfman was supposed to kickstart a Universal Monster franchise renewal and didn't. Dracula Untold was supposed to, and now this was supposed to. And they keep going up to bat trying to launch the Universal Monsters as a viable blockbuster franchise. And they keep tripping every single time out the gate. I
think part of it is because they keep being determined they have to be these big blockbuster type affairs. And I just go, why don't you, license this out to Blumhouse and see what he could create for $20 million.
Yeah, they're all big action movies. Every single, even though the tone is different on all 4 of them, they're all big action movies.
It's weird to me that the Dracula one is the best of the 4. And it's not very good, but it's definitely the best of the 4. Yeah. I don't know what's going on at Universal and why they haven't learned their lesson, but clearly this shows that they have not. And even the thing I enjoyed most in this is the stuff where they're kind of doing the crossover universe stuff, but only because I was so bored with the rest of it. I'm much more interested now in Henry Jekyll than I am in whatever the fuck Tom Cruise is doing here. Yeah. Who I guess is going to be the Mummy when he crosses over into another film.
Yeah, it sort of ends up being a superhero origin story.
Yeah.
There may have been a better story in this idea of assembling a team of monster hunters versus it being sort of this weird origin story of a superheroic mummy man with immortal powers, which is when all is said and done is sort of what the movie is.
Yeah. I always, if you want this sort of thing, be like, man, I wish this worked. Well, they did a TV show called Penny Dreadful that for the first 2 seasons did a damn good job of it already. So watch that. That's what, I was like, oh, this is exactly what we wanted. It's League of Extraordinary Monsters. It's great. Mm-hmm. But this is just another mediocre action film, which is a shame. I actually think not Annabelle Wallis, who was horrible and totally flat in her role as the love interest in this film, but Sophia Boutella, who plays the Mummy, I think she's kind of a charming, very charismatic, good at action actress, but she's so utterly covered in CG throughout this whole thing that you're like, okay. Well,
yeah, she's an interesting screen presence. Yeah, she really is.
I loved her in The Kingsman. She made such a neat.
I never saw her.
You got to watch The Kingsman.
I liked her in the Star Trek movie.
Yes, me too. There's a lot. Of course, there's a lot of Blu-ray extras on here, including about 5 minutes of deleted and extended scenes. A conversation between Cruise and the director Alex Kurtzman. A thing called Rooted in Reality, which is supposed to say, oh, this is how it ties into the real Mummy story. There is no real Mummy story. Relax. Life in Zero G. Honestly, the best scene in this whole thing is the plane crash you guys all saw in the commercial, but you pretty much saw that scene if you saw the trailer. So it's oh, okay then. Look at Sophia Boutella's character, talking about Cruise in action scenes, which once again aren't done very well here. A look at the Jekyll and Hyde thing with Russell Crowe. Look at the choreography. Another look at Tom Cruise's character. A animated graphic novel that's sort of more the history of the Mummy character here, and then an audio commentary with Sophia Boutella, Annabelle Wallis, and Jake Johnston, along with Alex Kurtzman, talking about it in detail. But I'm probably never going to listen to that. I'm thinking. Just saying.
Yeah, unless it's one of those commentaries where they're brutally honest about the reception and what they could have done differently and how it might have been a misstep to launch a universe with it. Unless they're getting that nitty-gritty with it, I don't feel like listening to just them, puff piece, like everybody patting themselves on the back.
So rarely does that ever happen with those. You always hope that they'll be for big bombs, they'll be like, okay, we're going to do a humble, but here's how we fucked up track. For people who are like, oh, this is a part of film history, and I'm curious in that. The only one I can even think of is Batman and Robin, which he didn't do that commentary until 20 years later.
Yeah, sometimes you have to wait, or sometimes a director is just brutally honest. I think one of the best commentary tracks I've ever heard was for the movie The Cell. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that Tarsem does on it is talk specifically, and the movie isn't a notorious bomb. It's fairly well received, but it's not, but to hear a director like Tarsem talk so frankly about what he felt like specifically worked and didn't work while talking on the commentary. And he's brutally honest, this doesn't work for me, or this was too excessive, but when we shot it, we were trying to do this. And he that's what I appreciate, is that sort of honesty, not necessarily that congratulatory puff piece sort of
oh, this person was so great to work with, and this was so great. I loved this. Yeah. I'm actually curious. I wonder if Jordan Voight Roberts is harsh on himself in the commentary track for Kong Skull Island, because he did that video where he was like so harsh. Even the guys who that's their job to be harsh were like, Jesus Christ, dude.
Yeah. Maybe so.
Nobody criticizes my movie better than me. All right, so our next cop movie makes The Mummy look like it was totally worth your time, and that is a Lionsgate direct-to-DVD release called The Hatred. Yeah, I was actually kind of enjoying the first 20 minutes or so of this when it was like the prequel part of the movie where it's like, okay, this is in the past and it's a farmhouse and a family and a guy's like the farmer we find out was an ex-Nazi, you know, who went into hiding and started a family here. And he's got this mystical amulet that Hitler had that apparently has hate powers or some shit. Never was entirely clear on how this MacGuffin amulet worked, but it infected him and he ended up murdering his family. And then it's like, okay, I was like, well, I was kind of into that story, but no, take the sepia filter off, flash to later, and it's a bunch of really banal like 20-something sorority girls who, for reasons I was not entirely clear on, are staying in this fixed-up house.
I could not, and my girlfriend watched this with me, and we had lengthy discussions during the first 45 minutes of this film about exactly what they were doing, because they talk about tutoring the girl, because they're babysitting the girl, and they're staying in her house, but her parents aren't there.
Yeah,
and it was like we were vaguely confused by what the relationship was between the parents, these sorority girls, this little girl. Why were they all staying in her house if they were her tutors?
And if this little girl they're pulling the whole, she's keyed in to there's something dark that's coming. She's been living in this house for a while.
Yeah, it was that stuff was super confusing to me.
Did not get it. Did like the Nazi ghost decide not to show up until like someone who was past puberty was living there?
He was waiting for sorority girl.
I mean, I get it from a horror movie monster mentality, but still, you know what I mean? Really, you're just like, huh? And the ghost as such appears as we saw him in the past. He was, you know, they ran an orange grove, and he would wear this like gas mask and creepy looking outfit to spray the trees. And so, of course, that's what he looks like. But the whole thing is this whole house is supposed to have been fixed up from top to bottom. And then they go down to the basement, and there's just pictures lying around of this guy in the Nazi outfit. And I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, when they get to the whole decoding the mystery part of the film, I'm like, so they fixed everything in the house, but they didn't bother to go in the basement at any point.
No, they did. They decorated it with Nazi photos. That was part of their remodel. I mean, they wanted to bring it up to 2017 standards. So just Nazi paraphernalia everywhere.
Right. I admit there was a point about that. No, I just started laughing while I was watching this. I was going, come on, guys, seriously? I mean, it's not like this thing had zero budget. You can tell it's kind of slickly shot.
Yeah, it was kind of slick. I felt, and that was the part that surprised me the most. I think coming off of like Charlotte from the last time I was on the show, I expected something that was way more DIY and low budget.
Yeah.
But it's all, other than the like kind of clunky story pieces that don't sort of fit together, it's all around sort of, it's got a polish to it. It's very much like, you know, if I were 8 years old and having a slumber party, I think it would have satisfied me, but I'm not 8 years old having a slumber party.
Right. When we were 8 years old at slumber parties, we watched some really terrible movies back then that we now have nostalgic feelings for, while still noting that they are indeed about this horrible. Yeah. You know, I go in like, I watched Slumber Party Massacre tons of times. Doesn't mean it's a good movie. Just means I saw it when I was like 8 years old the first time. Although I will defend to the death Slumber Party Massacre 2.
Okay.
Which is,
I haven't seen either. I haven't seen the Slumber Party Massacre films.
You're not familiar with that oeuvre. The Hatred is like one of those not enough effort. It's actually, and it's got a weird mix between I thought the lead actress is actually not too bad in this, but everybody else really looks like they barely even qualify as actors.
Yeah,
including
the little girl I thought the little girl was good.
Yeah, she was fun. And the guy when we saw in the prequel, the guy playing the dad in the family, I was
Andrew
like,
Divoff, the Wishmaster himself.
Is that who that is?
That is who that is. And then Casey Seismeko, who I love it when the no, it's not Casey, because Casey's the boy. Nina Seismeko. Mm-hmm. They're brother and sister, and I love it when one of them shows up in a movie. I don't know what it is about the two of them. He was in 3 O'Clock High. He played the lead in 3 O'Clock High.
Oh, yeah.
His sister in the 90s was always cast as the hot girl. Mm-hmm. She's the dingy blonde in Airheads, if you remember the movie Airheads.
It's been a long time, but yeah.
If you looked up pictures from her from the 90s, you might remember her because she was sort of a character actress that would pop up and stuff as sort of like a bimbo-type character. But I've always liked them as actors, and so to see her at the beginning as the mom, I was like, oh,
I know her.
I haven't seen her in forever, yeah.
She was in The Artist.
Nice. Yeah.
I forgot about that. Yeah, I'm like, once I looked at her, I was like, oh, yeah, I've seen her in lots of stuff. She's in The American President and Suicide Kings. Yeah. Well, either way, I don't think that makes us I can't recommend this movie. I mean, come on. Desperation. If you're just like, I have seen literally every other horror movie that is available to me at this point, and someone hands you a copy of The Hatred, then go for it.
Here's what I think about The Hatred, because I did expect to hate it, and I didn't give it. I filled out my little letterboxed thing, and I was like, I can't give it 1 star because they're truly 1-star movies, so I gave it like 2 stars.
Yeah,
but in regards to it versus The Mummy, and The Mummy trying to hit a target and Hatred trying to hit a target, I think Hatred comes closer to what it's attempting to do.
That's true.
Than what The Mummy does.
That is accurate.
So that's the most positive thing I can say about The Hatred.
Fair enough. All right, well, let's move on to something that I thought was considerably better. I don't think it's perfect, but and it certainly had mixed reviews, but that is the movie My Cousin Rachel, based upon the same 1951 novel by Daphne du Maurier, who, of course, has been the author of many a short story that was inspired or was directly adapted into famous suspense or horror films, including... Rebecca, I believe, is one of the big ones. But, this one takes Rachel Weisz. God, just always been in love with her. Since the first time I saw her, I was like, her? She's amazing.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen, what is it, Agora, I think it's called?
No.
It's kind of the story of, like, a feminist atheist and, like, her coming out as one in a period of time when that was not appropriate.
No, I think the first thing I ever saw her in where I noticed her was Chain Reaction, which is not a good movie, but that's the first thing where I was like,
The Mummy is,
Yeah.
Or The Fountain.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, she's playing in here this, what's it, post-Victorian, but just barely, piece where she's not the main character. You follow this guy named Philip, who was orphaned as a kid and was adopted by his older cousin, who, that period of him being young doesn't last very long, but he's gotten older. He's kind of he's not like the highly educated sort, but he's not like dumb either. He's more like, I like to work with my hands type of guy. And he loves his cousin. He has become his father as far as he's concerned. And he becomes very concerned when his cousin goes away and starts writing back about this wonderful woman that he's met and that he's so in love with her. And then mysteriously, he passes away suddenly. And there's in his writing, there's insinuations that it has something to do with her. Well, Philip is pissed and with a righteous anger and wants revenge against this woman that he's just convinced himself must have had something to do with his death. And said woman, by Rachel Weisz, shows up and just immediately just charms the pants off of absolutely everyone, including him, which is probably the most frustrating thing about this film, because he goes from so righteously angry to almost instantly like, I will do anything that she wants.
Yeah.
I'm like, I was like, is the supernatural going to get involved in this?
All I did was look at her.
Yeah, I was like, is she a witch? Is that where we're going? Is this a horror movie? I mean, and it is in a way. It is and it isn't. It's one of those, like, it's a lot about whatever you decide actually happened type of films, which I know could be frustrating as well. Like, towards the end, you're like, well, what do you think her motivation really was? I mean, I really enjoyed her performance in this. I thought she got that perfect balance of trying to do that, where you never really know how to feel. Is she malevolent, or is this more of a sort of like a man's point of view looking at a woman who's not giving him exactly what he wants, because she's basically like, yeah, of course I'm attracted to you, but I don't want to fall in love with you. And he's like, that's outrageous.
In that way, it reminded me of her performance in The Shape of Things, if you remember the movie The Shape of Things.
Oh, yeah. Where
she manipulates men with her charms. Okay, so there's certain movies where we have like these, they're sort of like exercises. You see them a lot in like action films where it's just like some mid-budget action film starring, Liam Neeson or whoever, and it comes out and it satisfies a particular audience, and it kind of dies on the vine, and you won't remember it 10 years later. Somebody will bring it up. And I'm not talking about, like, Taken. I'm talking about some of the
nonstop
stuff that's come out after. And to me, this was like the drawing room period piece of those kind of movies, where it's like, if you like these sort of like gothic romance films, this is like right in that like mid-level where it's well made, but it's not particularly exceptional. And if that's what tickles your fancy, and that's like a certain type of genre that you react really strongly to, then you'll like this more than me, who doesn't necessarily like click with that genre. And it usually takes something that really like transcends the genre for me to really like get into it.
Yeah, not everything can be Wuthering Heights.
Yeah, so for a lot of this movie, I was like, please, let's go.
Let's move this along, people.
Yeah, let's pick up the pace. Let's reveal some more things. And it was a tough watch for me in that way, because sometimes you just have to power through a movie. You've started it, you're committed, and it's not even that it's bad. It's just, not every movie's for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I mean, and this is very slowly paced. I mean, it's one of those films, and I'm going to anger someone out there by comparing it to this, but It Comes at Night, that, nothing comes at night, but the movie's soundtrack is convinced at every moment it is about to show up. And this is one of those films, like, it's like everyone on a technical level is convinced shit is about to fucking burn to the ground. But nothing ever really happens. It's all sort of like, but maybe there was stuff we didn't see, or like, who should we even be siding with here? But nothing really happens.
Yeah.
It's kind of frustrating because it feels like it's leading you to like that it's going to get explosive, and it just kind of peters out. Really, with you being left with like, okay, so basically I'm still in the position of not knowing.
Even the tragedy of the finale of the film, not a spoiler, but the tragedy of the finale of the film takes place off camera.
Yeah.
So even then it's not fulfilling in that way.
Yeah, and even like it happening in and of itself was kind of like, oh, well, that's not really what I would have...
That's how it ends?
Yeah, I was very confused, but I was so taken with Weiss's performance here that I did enjoy it very much on that level. I just thought she was terrific in this, and she got what she was supposed to do. I'm not sure Sam Claflin, who played Philip, did. I think he was. I mean, and maybe that's kind of the point. There's definitely a lot of like feminist ideas at work in this particular telling of this, and he is supposed to be a man-child, but it's just aggravating watching him.
You know who I liked watching in this movie? Is it Tristram Davies? Is Wellington the manservant?
I believe so, yeah.
This guy looks like a freaking cartoon drawing of an old British person. He has these like gigantic triangular eyebrows, and there's a scene where his face fills half the screen in profile, and it looks like rock climbing. Like, you just want to like put on your Under Armour and like grab a nostril and start scaling his face.
Just scale Tristram.
Yeah, this guy is like the quintessential like old Englishman, and I liked looking at him anytime he was on screen.
You just want to have a cup of tea whenever he's on screen, don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, brought to you by him, and him to say something in a very stately voice, "Sir, your tea."
He has a pretty good like funny scene as well, which is the scene where the main character first arrives and he hasn't seen Rachel, and he's asking him, well, what does she look like? And the guy's just not being responsive, like doesn't know whether she's fat, skinny, young, old, like doesn't know any of that.
Right. Yeah, that is funny. And he's like, he's odd. His motivations he's more of a character than you'd think by just being the butler. He's always sort of like, you can tell he's feeling like he's trying to get his master to do the right thing. And then that moment where he's no longer his master, boy, he turns cold real fast. Yeah. He's like, well, you fucked up. I don't know what to tell you. Ain't my master no more. Anyway, yeah, there's a certain amount of extras. There's some deleted scenes, some EPK-type featurettes, stuff about the score, and audio commentary by Roger Mitchell, who directed it, and the producer Kevin Loder, which I'm always kind of like, get at least one actor in these fucking things. But not in this case. Yeah, I think you're right when you said, that if you already like this kind of thing, yeah, this is one we're seeing. You're not going to think it's one of the best ones they've made, but like, if this is not normally your sort of thing, then no, do not go out of your way to watch My Cousin Rachel. All right, so you didn't get a chance to watch this, but I'm going to talk briefly about the second season of Narcos. Still weird to me that they send out they even make Blu-rays of Netflix shows. They never go away, and there's rarely anything really significant in the way of bonus features either. So you're like, so this is just so I can have it at 1080? I don't know. But I do say I genuinely like the show Narcos a lot, which of course follows the story of Pablo Escobar. The first season and the second season are sort of very much the companion seasons because they're about him. As everyone knows, spoiler, Pablo Escobar dies before even middle age. I mean, he don't make it to a ripe old age. And the second season concludes the Pablo Escobar story, where you're like, wait, there's a third season? Yeah, because the show's called Narcos, not Escobar, and it already this season spends a lot of time setting up, the crime families that were moving into power as Escobar was on the run from the law. This whole second season is he's totally on the run. He's hiding out and slowly but surely having more and more taken away from him, losing everyone who was associated with him, is people going to jail or getting murdered. And it's odd how they want you all. It almost feels like they want you to feel sympathy for the guy, but how could you possibly? He's not a psychopath, but he's definitely a sociopath. This guy who's like, I get at the time, like the poor loved him because he was spending hundreds of millions of dollars, like, paying, building people houses, free housing and bringing food to everyone and building parks and stuff. I get it. But there was a point where even everyone pretty much turned against him because he was like, he pretty much murdered hundreds of police officers in one day once, for revenge against them trying to catch him.
Is that documented in the film?
In the show, yes, it is. And yeah, it's definitely a really entertaining watch. It's a little distracting when they do the thing because they love to do a thing where they show actual footage of people, like the real people, and then go to the actors. And I'm like, okay, that pulled me right out of it, because they're, on the whole, this is structured in a straight narrative fiction sort of way. And it definitely takes some license with the story. There's some dramatic exaggeration here as Pablo Escobar's son, who's the only member of the surviving family, has come out and said, not to defend his dad, but to say, boy, you guys really made up a whole bunch of shit. It didn't happen. But yeah, this is like, it's the end of season 2, or the end of the Escobar story, but it also, I think, is kind of essential if you were more interested in the chaos that followed his death as the big hole that had to be filled, as everyone fighting and trying to step into it, because a good half of this season is about setting up those new characters that are coming in that will be the antagonists, or are, because I haven't watched it. It's on Netflix now, season 3. But yeah, such good performances across the board in this thing. Everybody seems to be moving on to other bigger and better stuff from this. Like the lead, one of the lead cop characters there, Boyd Holbrook, is being cast in fucking everything right now. And nobody knew who the fuck he was before this. Yeah, in terms of extras, there's a 20-minute declassifying Narcos Season 2 where it's the creative staff just talking about how they brought structure and in a narrative sense onto the actual events. There's an audio commentary with one of the directors, executive producer, and actor Wagner Moura, and there's about 8.5 minutes of deleted scenes, which I'm still like, why are you putting this out on Blu-ray? But I guess some people were like, I just go to Redbox. I don't use Netflix.
Yeah, there's some.
I guess. All right, so let's move on to another movie we did, in fact, both see. And this is like my second favorite movie on the list for us this week, probably, of stuff that, at least of stuff that like was completely off my radar.
Yeah.
And that is The Big Knife, directed by Robert Aldrich, who's kind of one of the masters of film noir, of early film noir. Back in 1955, this surprisingly cast Jack Palance in its lead as a very privileged Hollywood actor, and in fact 99% of this film is just like almost a play set, a theatrical set just of his home, who is dealing with his wife who's about to leave him. He doesn't want her to leave, and part of the reason she doesn't want him to renew his contract with kind of a huckster producer who wants him to sign like a 7-year thing. But what she doesn't realize is that producer, he got some shit on Jack Palance. He knows about some stuff he did that he shouldn't have done. And he's torn between just openly dealing with this situation and therefore not being stuck in a contract with this guy, or just going, okay, fine, it's just easier just to go ahead. Because truly he really does want to get back with his wife, even though he can't seem to stop putting his dick in other actresses. Which almost happens like 3 times in this movie. But this is, like, despite, like I said, being filmed more like a play than anything else, I found this incredibly involving and just a fascinating story, and one of my favorite Jack Palance performances.
Yeah, it is to use a cliche critic term, gripping. I found it gripping, and it's based on a play.
Okay, that makes sense.
Which is also why it is so stagey. But there are also very theatrical moments. There were a couple where characters like come in through the front door, which is perpetually open, make some sort of announcement, and then like leave out the front door. So from a stage play standpoint, you end up where you really only. They kind of only shoot in 2 rooms. There's a little bit outside the house, but mostly it's like 2 rooms. It's like this like side study and like the main sort of living area. But the trade-off in that is you get really good dialogue. Really, really good, punchy as hell dialogue, and great acting, characterization, just absolutely gripping. And it was one of those movies where it wasn't on very long before it kind of cast its spell, and I was like, this is going to be really good. Yeah. And it was really good.
I completely agree. And you have so many good other actors here. Edie Lupino playing his wife, who's terrific. And you got to say Rod Steiger playing like the slimy Hollywood mogul guy who wants to sign the contract, who's like goes from like the kindly old grandfather type attitude towards like to instantly like, oh, you fuck with me, I'll fuck with you.
He's a great villain in this movie. He's such a good villain. And one of my favorite scenes in this movie, and it'll stay with me, is the scene where he assumes Jack Palance is going to beat the shit out of him, and he curls up, and Jack Palance just smacks him on the head, just like a light slap. I love that scene.
Yeah.
He's such a. There are those big screen villains that it's just like you love them. They're so interesting to watch. You would never want to meet that person in real life, and Rod Steiger is so good in this.
And it's interesting, as a film that's unquestionably a film noir, it is questionable until you get about to the halfway point, because you're like, how is this film noir? And it's not till you really start realizing the ugly underbelly and how incredibly conflicted and imperfect Jack Palance's character is here that you really start seeing how pertinent that really is. And boy, does this get dark. I mean, like, that last 20 minutes was like, Jesus Christ. Yeah, definitely film noir.
Yeah.
It's not for anybody who wants an old school Hollywood happy ending, that's for sure.
No, but it is again, crackling dialogue, fantastic performances across the board. Well worth seeing. Definitely needs to be a film that deserves some rediscovery, because I felt like it was not even something I'd heard of. I didn't know what it was when I got the pile of discs. It wasn't on my radar at all.
Yeah, me neither.
And you had recommended it. You were like, hey, I really like this. You need to check this one out. And I feel like it's ripe for rediscovery. I feel like it's one that it's like, if you are a film buff, it's one you really need to seek out and watch, because it's damn good. And
it's Arrow Video re-releasing this, who's really proven themselves to be pretty good at finding these little hidden gems like this. It comes with a commentary by some film historians. There's a bit about Saul Bass, an interview with him for 33 minutes, who, of course, is the all-time great title creator, and he's talking about his history of doing that. So he's probably the greatest title creator there is, or was. There's a television promo, which is basically like an old school EPK, and then the original trailer. So it comes with a booklet with essays and stuff. It's not their biggest package ever, but I imagine there's only so much stuff around about this. This is a film that unfortunately kind of slipped between the cracks for a lot of film fans, over the decades. And like you said, it's very much worth, I think, looking back into and rediscovering.
Yeah, it still feels, short of the fashions and that sort of thing, it's still, there's something about the bluntness with which they talk to each other that gives, and the again, the kind of bleakness to it that makes it feel very modern. It doesn't feel like it's from the Leave It to Beaver era.
Agreed. All right, so our next one is going into it seems like I try to at least every show have at least one martial arts or at least like Chinese, Korean, some Eastern film, and I love like the cinema of Japan and China and Korea and lately Indonesia and Vietnam, and this one is from Hong Kong, and wow, okay. So this guy who's kind of come out of nowhere called Yu Song, like he has decided that he's the new Bruce Lee. Like he is pretty much, that's his personal decision as a public persona. I am the new mega badass, and he is all about self-promotion, right? And he did a really crappy martial arts movie called The King of the Streets that came out, I think, last year. I was like, ugh. I mean, he's all right, but this movie's just bad. And the one thing I'll say about this new movie, Iron Protector, he's pretty much badass as shit in this movie. I'll hand him that. I'm like, damn, you do some crazy, fucked up shit during this. There's a scene where he just crashes through the window of a moving car, and I was like, holy fuck. Like, they show you several times to be sure you didn't miss it and see that he actually did that stunt. But it's about as ridiculous and dumb a movie as you can ask for.
You know, they kind of go for this like live action anime thing. There's like these weird transitions where it's supposed to look sort of like a cartoon, but it looks just like a Photoshop filter.
Yeah.
That you could kind of tell they were going for sort of a comic booky thing, or like the opening scene where it's the little kid with the bow tie and a bowl haircut eating the ice cream that for some reason pees all over him.
I was like, what was that?
Yeah, and it sets the tone for how sort of like cartoony and goofy it sort of is overall.
Yeah.
Kind of a convoluted revenge story, but it boils down to two old friends that have drifted apart due to some bigger plan of revenge, and the main character wearing these big iron boots that, of course, and still being able to kick the shit out of people with the boots on, meaning that when the boots finally come off, he's got the fastest feet in the world.
Yeah.
But it's got a lot of fight scenes that were diverting. It was diverting. That's about the best I can say about it.
I mean, it tries to cross the plot you're talking about with almost a remake of the Hong Kong movie The Bodyguard. It's almost just a straight remake, just smashed together with this other thing. And none of that stuff is interesting outside of, like, what were they thinking moments. Like, my God, it wants to be so loud and brash and crazy, and it doesn't really succeed. It's just kind of obnoxious. But I did genuinely enjoy several of the fight sequences in here. And I think Yu Song is definitely, he's got some charisma. He's a good-looking guy. He's extremely talented at martial arts. And it's just a shame he's not in a better movie.
Yeah.
This is a lot better than his last one, which was so slow, and you're like, oh, for fuck's sakes.
Oh, this isn't slow. I didn't find this one slow.
No, it's not slow at all.
It's just goofy.
It's just, it's absurd.
Yeah.
Like, it just makes the weirdest, and you're right, it feels more like it's an adaptation of a video game we just never heard of.
I actually looked up halfway through watching it. I was like, this has got to be based on some manga I've never read. And I couldn't find out. I didn't find that it was based on any manga, but I thought for sure this has got to be based on a comic.
Yeah, as far as I know, it is not, but it sure does feel that way. This is one of those when you want to watch a big, dumb, fun martial arts film, but when you're only halfway paying attention to it with your friends, like, you're inviting friends over for a beer and chop sake night. This is a movie for that.
It's weird. There was, I think it's on IMDb, maybe, but I was trying to find out when I was looking to find out if it's based on a manga, I read a synopsis that it described the plot of the movie, except that it described him as having onset dementia. And I was like, what? I didn't pick up on anything unless they changed something in the translation.
Yeah.
I picked up on nothing of him having the onset of dementia.
No.
I thought there's a little bit about him being a country bumpkin and not understanding the way that the city world works.
Right.
And they say that like explicitly in the dialogue that he's from the country.
They try so hard to play up the fish out of water stuff in the Bodyguard storyline for humor's sake.
But then I began to wonder, are in Chinese, are they saying, like, in Mandarin, are they actually talking about the fact, not that he's a country bumpkin, but that he's losing his mind?
It'd be interesting if they had just totally rejiggered this whole thing for an American audience. Like, yeah, they're not going to connect with that, so we'll just create this other false narrative.
It's really strange.
I don't know what to tell you. It's one of the weirdest things about this, though, is they marketed it saying no tricks, no wires, all real. And then there's a bonus feature that shows them clearly using wire work, like unmistakably.
Do the, like, Matrix style fighting where you're running across people's faces. That's physically impossible.
I know. I'm like, how would you, man? It's like every single thing about this movie is just like about this guy who's got more balls than sense. I did have fun with it, so whatever. Let's move on to Funny Bones. And I've been hearing about this movie for forever. It's one of those ones always been on my list. You know, one of these days I'm going to check that one out. And it's partially, I think, because I have a lot of British friends, because apparently England loved this movie. America didn't get it. And maybe it's because I'm American. I didn't get it.
It didn't work for me. I could see where it was going. I know what it's aiming for, this, like, kind of like magical and wacky tone that feels false and insincere, because I don't think it ever succeeds at the tone. Mm-hmm. It lives there the whole time. And it's never quite successful at capturing it. So it's like what they're going for is always just out of reach for the entire running time.
It wants to be both manic and melodramatic. Yeah. And it's like the only points that really achieve like any sort of level of word that, that was really interesting, or of course Lee Evans, who most of us in America like go, I think I saw him in something once, but is a deeply respected comedian, funny man overseas. And he's really good in moments of this where you're like, God damn, that guy is incredibly talented physical comedian.
Most listeners would probably know him from There's Something About Mary.
Yes.
He's the guy that's not Matt Dillon or Ben Stiller. And he also has a cameo in Fifth Element.
Yes.
But yeah, Mouse Hunt with Nathan Lane. He co-stars with Nathan Lane in that. So that was another one where he was kind of the star of an American film.
I always mix him up with the guy in my head for some reason, who was the character who was their little bitch friend in the Trey Parker Matt Stone movie.
Dean Bakar. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm always like in my head, I always thinking, is that Lee Evans? That's not Lee Evans. Anyway, basic story. This came out in 1995. Oliver Platt plays the son of Jerry Lewis, or at least the characters they're playing, who in this case, Jerry Lewis is essentially supposed to be Jerry Lewis.
Yeah.
And Oliver Platt wants desperately to be a comedian, and he's not good at it.
Yeah, and it's one of those things like talking about The Mummy, where the film starts off a certain way where its own logic works against the film, which is if he's playing the strip and he's able to fill the place, but you're also telling me that he's crappy and nobody laughs at his jokes, and I'm like, I don't understand
how did he get
going
there.
On here.
The best I could get is they were like, well, he's got the same name as the son of the world's, as they keep saying, the world's most popular comedian, so he got in there by name recognition alone, I assume. But there's also a confusing thing where he's all like, well, that's it. I didn't succeed tonight, so I'm going to kill myself in 2 weeks. And you're like, wait, what? Why? And nothing else that ever happens in the rest of this film plays out in any way that makes sense to me at all. And there's the whole other storyline with Lee Evans, who ends up having when basically Oliver Platt goes to Blackpool, England, where he grew up spending summers, and finds out that like he's going there to try and buy jokes from people, basically, or at least characters and routines. And he ends up finding out that a group of very old, like classically trained comedians there used to work with his dad. And in fact, he stole all his original material from them that he got famous for. And he's just appalled that his dad was a thief and stole the stuff that made him big. And in fact, finds that he has a real connection to them in a way even past that. And there's this weird storyline that seems apropos of nothing, where Lee Evans is in trouble with criminals because he stole these wax eggs that have some sort of like super cocaine or something in it, as near as I can tell.
Yeah.
Like it makes you like feel super young again and be really energized, which just plays out to a joke towards the end with the old guys. this thing just goes all over the place. And I couldn't, like, outside of a few moments where there's a great thing where Lee Evans is doing, like, well, I'm going to start performing now, and he does an act where it's all him just sort of mouthing stuff over a preset track of, like, old radio stuff. That's really genuinely super funny, I thought. I was like, wow, that guy's really good at this type of humor. But they're just moments, and they never feel like they gel with anything else that's going on in the film.
Yeah.
I don't get it. Oliver Reed is in this as well. Leslie Caron. I don't know. Meh.
Yeah, it's meh. It's probably being released because of curiosity about Jerry Lewis's filmography and it being one that maybe wasn't as readily accessible, especially in something being made in the 90s, being one of his later films. So it's a curio in that regard, but again, Jerry Lewis, you're seeing him play himself, and if you're going to see him play himself, King of Comedy is a superior movie to watch him play a version of himself. Considerably
better. Yeah. I would recommend that one. All right, so let's move on to the next one that I'm actually, and which is not, I'm actually going to say is, like, would have been my pick of the week, because I genuinely enjoyed it, but when it came down to it, the last film we're going to talk about, I just can't deny is the best film we saw this week. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about the release that they put out of Wonder Woman. And this is not one of those, I know they keep re-releasing the animated one, which is pretty good. But I think maybe part of it is my expectations were so low after the previous 3 DCU films that I came out going, hooray! I didn't despise that, I was, like, really charmed by Wonder Woman. It got so much stuff right that the previous 3 films got completely wrong. It had a sense of humor about itself. It had a lightness. And yet, it's not. I would not put it even in the top 10 superhero movies ever made, It's not one of the best ones. It's just the best one DC's done in a while.
Yeah, I maybe had the opposite. I didn't see it till maybe a week after release, so at that point it had been so hyped up as being absolutely incredible that I felt kind of bad that I was like, it's good.
Yeah.
It's as good as most comic book movies are.
People coming out and actually saying, it is definitely the best superhero movie ever made. I'm like, I don't... Have you watched a lot of superhero movies? Like, this isn't even in the same league as The Dark Knight. This is a okay to pretty good superhero movie that is pleasing on a number of different other levels because A, we finally get a Wonder Woman movie and it's pretty good. B, we've got a female director for a big superhero movie who, does a really good job with the material. And they didn't fall into any of the traps we were kind of all afraid that a Wonder Woman movie would fall into.
The story makes sense. It's a hopeful movie. It's got heart and humor. The other thing I like about Wonder Woman is similar to Christopher Reeve in Superman or Hugh Jackman as Logan in the first X-Men. She's such an unknown that you can almost imprint onto her. Mm-hmm. Where when you see Hugh Jackman for the first time in X-Men in that steel cage, you're like, I'm looking at Wolverine.
Yeah.
And there's some of that in regards to her where you're just sort of like, she's Wonder Woman. That's who she is.
You never have any trouble buying that.
She'll make other movies, and even general public will be like, it's that movie starring Wonder Woman.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. I was cynical about her after her role in Batman v Superman, but I think people were like, oh, she was one of the best things in it. I was like, really? Because I thought that was kind of gross, those scenes with her in it, actually.
Yeah.
You're just like, every single outfit she wears is cut down to her navel, and you're just like, what is... Oh, God, Zack Snyder, no. You're not allowed to be in charge of Wonder Woman. But this really... She's a super positive role model for young girls, we've got... unquestionably the best female lead superhero movie we've seen.
Yeah.
Right? Like, no question. And I'm sure Marvel immediately went, we got to make sure that Captain Marvel is really fucking good after seeing this.
I'm excited about the prospects of a sequel as well because I feel like sort of... I would say that there's a hesitancy to the screenplay where it's almost... I think it errs on the side of conventional simply because it's like, we don't want to mess this up. And so we're going to construct this somewhat conventionally. We hope that there's enough unconventional elements that people will respond to those. but we're going to play it safe in regards to sort of like superhero origin structure,
Right.
and it's going to feel very familiar. And I'm hoping that now that they've got, you know, a $400 million domestic box office under their belt, that they'll have the confidence to go, okay, we don't have to play it as conventional.
Let's shake things up.
Yeah, and I'm really, really looking forward to seeing what they do with the character beyond Justice League.
Yeah, I'm less interested in Justice League than I am in the next film in this series.
Yeah.
Which I guess they seemed like they were going back and forth on whether it would be a period piece again or it would be modern day. I hope they actually do another period piece.
I thought I'd heard it was a period piece.
At one point they were saying it was, and then they were saying it wasn't, and then they were saying it was again, so I don't know. And they just hired like 3 new writers, or 2 new writers as well to write it, to go over the script with Patty Jenkins, who was writing it with Jeff Johns. So,
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, that means there's more changes. So who knows? I know they're really determined to get it right. Now, a lot of you guys have already seen this. We, of course, did a whole theatrical review of this as well that you can listen to on the site. But you're like, well, is this worth owning on Blu-ray? And I will give it a yes. I absolutely feel that it is. First off, this is just a really gorgeously shot movie. There's so much beautiful stuff in here. I mean, like Justin Themyscira alone is just so nice. And if you have a really good television, what?
No, nothing.
Did I say it wrong?
No, you didn't. I was reminded of something.
What?
I was reminded of my favorite Easter egg moment in this film.
Oh, what was that?
Which is, so I'm not saying that this is the case, okay?
Okay.
I'm not saying that this is the reality. But anybody that knows Mr. Miracle knows that he took the name and the escape artist job from another man that was named Mr. Miracle, Thaddeus Brown, who was a world-famous escape artist. There's a weird aside when she first gets to England where it's not necessarily a focus on him, but she specifically walks past an escape artist who's like trying to get people to come watch him.
That couldn't have been accidental.
And I was like, is that Thaddeus Brown? But that's because I'm a nerd. And I was like, was that for me? Or was that, I don't know.
I love that we are living in the world that nerds made right now, and movies, the biggest movies that come out are filled with really obscure little references like that, just for those of us who are like, yes, I have read comics from the 1940s and 50s.
I didn't mean to interrupt with an aside about Mr. Miracle, but yes, back to the special features. Sorry, I was reminded of it, and I had a big old smile on my face.
I think the main thing that people were like going, oh, what is that going to be like, is there's a whole filmed sequence specifically made for the Blu-ray that takes place after Wonder Woman, with the character of Etta Candy gathered together with the rest of the team that went on the World War II or World War I mission. And she's like, well, we have a new mission, and they're like, well, where's Diana? It's like, well, she can't be here, but I'm in charge. And they're like, woman can't be in charge. Like, well, Diana was in charge. Like, well, she's tall. There's a lot of jokes. And then there's her. You remember that Diana kicked the shit out of the one guy in the bar who was coming for the other one of her team members? Yeah. Well, Etta does the exact same thing to the exact same guy. She takes him out, and everyone in the bar's like, oh, he got his ass kicked by 2 different ladies. And it's like, okay, it's cute. And it's mainly there so they can see her opening up the book and of like notes from the government of what they have to do, and you can see it's clearly a picture of a mother box, and you're like, oh, okay, so it ties into.
Was that supposed to be a post-credit scene, and they dropped it?
I don't know, maybe. Didn't say. I didn't listen to see it. I don't think there was a separate commentary for it.
Interesting.
But there's a lot of like, you know, the way they do, where there's like they break up the documentary making of into a ton of connected featurettes, so you can just watch it straight through, or you can pull one out separately. They try and take every little aspect and examine it. And honestly, Patty Jenkins, who talks through a lot of this, is incredibly engaging and is just fun to listen to. Does a wonderful job showing how excited she was to be on this thing and really enjoyed doing it. There's a little bit here where they look at the legend of Wonder Woman and the history of her and how she works with the Trinity, you know, Batman and Superman. Obviously, that's coming up shortly. And a thing where they talk to a bunch of award-winning poets, and they said inspiring public figures. I did not get to watch this one, where they talk about how she was very impactful and important to them personally. There's a few extended scenes, nothing that was really added anything, basically an extra slight gag or two, but nothing essential. I will really recommend the blooper reel on this one, because I'll tell you what, Gal Gadot looks like she is just a ton of fun to be on set with. She's a big laugher, and she's like one of those people. She just looks like you're like, this is exactly what I want her to be like. Where she's like, they mess up and she hugs whoever she's with, type of thing, and she's like just like they're all just clearly having a great time on set. Everyone but the guy who played the bad guy. Who there's a scene where she's laughing, she's like, oh, it was it, and he's like never breaks character, and you're like, oh, relax, dude. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I totally think this is worth owning. If you're a fan of the movie, it is completely worth owning a copy of it. And it will indeed look beautiful on your big television set. Our last film this week is the one that I think we're both picking as our pick of the week here, which is a 1969 Sidney Pollack film called They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Awkward title, to be sure. One of the reasons I probably never got around to it, because I was like, what the hell is that even about?
Yeah.
And it's not about anything you would possibly imagine if all you had heard was the title.
Yeah. It was great.
Yeah. It's one of those, talk about one that it doesn't take long before you're like, whoa. It casts its spell over you, and you're like, yeah, I'm in it for the long haul on this one. I got to see where this is going to go. In fact, I had to pause this movie at one point because I'm like, this couldn't possibly have been real, right? This type of thing that's happening. It's like, it sure was.
Yeah, I think it's its title from a memoir about a guy who worked as a bouncer at these events.
Well, the events we're talking about in question are, they used to have these dance marathons, and most of us think of a dance marathon, we think of those things that went on for like maybe 5 or 6 hours type things, and people would drop out. You know, I mean, they still do that kind of thing. No. Back in the day, back in the Depression, they would do ones that went on for months, where, yeah, there would be breaks, but not for very long, and people, they would do horrible things to them during it, like suddenly go, okay, now everyone has to run as fast as they can around a track, and the last 3 people out are, you know, I mean, dangerous for your health stuff. Yeah. But people were so desperate that they were like, well, I don't see another way out but to try. We've got to try to win. And this follows, as our lead characters here, Jane Fonda, who's so amazing in this movie, who is dancing with a guy who just kind of wandered in.
Yeah.
You know, because her partner is disqualified because he's sick. And so this guy, goodness, what's his name? Michael Sarrazin, the actor, is playing this guy, Robert. Right when it starts, more or less, they're already, the thing's kind of going on. Gig Young plays the cynical, manipulative MC for the whole thing, who's running this event, who's great.
Yowza.
Yeah, exactly. And throughout the crowd, there's because you're following a bunch of different couples here, including you've got Red Buttons playing like an older but very likable middle-aged sailor guy, Susanna York and Robert Fields, who are aspiring actors who come there all dressed to the nines, not realizing that, you know, before we're even close to the halfway point of the movie, they look like they just slept in their clothes. You know, they're a mess. Bruce Dern and a very young Bonnie Bedelia playing his pregnant wife, which who the fuck would, that's one of the things you're like, you're letting your pregnant wife do this?
Yeah. There are moments of like just pure horror in this film. Yeah. I mean, some of it involves her, and it's funny. I just watched Salem's Lot, which she's in as well, and I had no context of her career as an actress before Die Hard.
Yeah, me neither.
And so seeing her in this, I was like, I had no idea she was making movies in the 60s.
I was shocked. I was like, wait a minute, I had to go on Wikipedia. How old is she? Like, wow. This is intense and dark, amazingly well acted across the board. One of those ones that will really make you'll have to stop it and get on Wikipedia just to read about the real story of these things, because it just gets more shocking the longer it goes on. And you wouldn't believe a movie that's just taking place at a dance marathon would be as gripping as this thing actually is.
Yeah, because it's not... what I expected reading the plot was something akin to like Hands on a Hard Body, where I thought it would be a little bit more like a sports movie. Yeah. And I would kind of get invested in the story and who was going to win and that sort of thing. It's not that. It's about the mental breakdown of these people over the course of this event as their bodies are being manipulated for entertainment by this almost Vince McMahon-esque almost like a carnival barker. But what a boy! And I actually found a lot of. I think it's an important film. I don't know if you have any pro wrestlers in your audience. I think it's an important film for anyone who uses their body for entertainment, whether it's dance or pro wrestling or anything like that. Where I felt strongly like there were parallels to the world of pro wrestling, where it is such a grind and it is such a physical toll, and the person who's booking you and telling you to go out there and do these things gets to sleep pain-free, and I thought, as a WWE fan, there were a lot of parallels in that sort of life and what was being presented on the screen. It's tough. It's a tough movie to watch. It's really, really good, and it's, again, it wasn't long before I realized, this is not going to be a sports movie about dancing.
No.
This is going to be something else entirely.
This is not strictly ballroom either.
Yeah.
This is a very dark tale of what people will do in times of desperate need, both in terms of the desperate and those taking advantage of the desperate.
You mentioned the Derby. They use it to kind of like burn off people. So if you're at the end, I think the last 3 people or something like that are cut.
Yeah.
And so they'll call Derby. They'll make everybody run around the dance floor in a circle as hard and as fast as they can until the time is up. One of the things that this movie does in that scene that I'm having trouble thinking of something that predates this, and you see it in movies all the time now. It's almost a visual cliche, which is some action is going on, and then it ramps to slow motion. Mm-hmm. It's silent, and then a completely different piece of music begins to play.
Right.
And I'm like, you see that all the time in movies and TV now, and I couldn't think of anything before this, and I was like, that may be the first instance of that, where you see people running, they're running, and then all of a sudden they're running in slow-mo, it's pin drop quiet, and then a song begins.
I hadn't thought about that, but
I was like, this may be the first instance of that
progenitor of that cliche. Well, this was deeply appreciated in its time. It's odd that it didn't stay one of those films that people talk about as much, whereas it really should be. And I genuinely hope this movie is getting rediscovered now. I mean, Gig Young won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for his performance. Fonda and York were nominated for Best Actress and Best Supporting Actress for this thing. And we'll get more on this in a second, there's an odd sort of kind of narrator thing that goes on throughout this that it starts with from the character Robert's point of view, where you're like, they tell you right from the beginning, he's in jail.
Well, I want to get into spoilers regarding that.
Right. And I'm going to say, we're going to talk about spoilers in just a second, but first, just to mention the bonus features here, and this is so you guys can finish. If you don't want to know the spoilers, you can stop right after the bonus features. There's a commentary with Sidney Pollack, who, I will say, this movie's incredibly atypical for Sidney Pollack. He never made anything else like this. And I would argue it's probably his strongest film.
Harrowing.
Another commentary with producers Irwin Winkler and Martin Baum, for some reason the hairstylist, and Jane Fonda, Bonnie Bedelia, Michael Sarrazin, and Red Buttons.
It is, I listened to commentary too, and just so people know, it's one of those commentaries where it's interviews edited together. So a lot of times they aren't even talking about the specifics of what you're seeing on the screen. They're just talking.
Okay, fair enough. And then there's a 6.5 minute, basically old school EPK called The Moonmakers, which is from the original making of from the movie's theatrical release, which gives you some picture of the background. I imagine this is probably all the footage that exists from behind the scenes of this movie. So, I mean, it's I want to say this is Kino who put this out.
Yeah, it is.
And they rarely put almost any bonus features at all on these re-releases, so it's kind of nice they actually did something, although this is a movie kind of shot Criterion didn't pick this one up.
Yeah, and the picture is okay. I've seen better Kino re-releases in regards to cleaning it up. It's a little muddy. Everything's sort of brown and gray. It's not like really strong. We haven't really talked about the AV of stuff. There's not really like the strong blacks and things like that. Now we're looking at some photos of it right now that actually look to me better than the image from the film, even though these are screenshots. But it's very brown, kind of low contrast movie.
Yeah, it's not as vibrant as it feels like it should.
Yeah, and it is so good it deserved a cleanup. It deserved like a nice scrubbing and some kind of restoration on it. It's really, really good.
It really is. I couldn't recommend this more highly to pretty much everybody. All right, so that ends the show formal. And now you guys don't want to know the spoiler. You go ahead and get out now. Are you gone? Okay, John, go.
So the way that the movie's structured is you see him at the beach. You see Robert at the beach. He's sort of wandering around. He kind of comes in. He looks like a drifter. He's watching the people sign up for the dance contest from afar. And you start to get these flashes. Now, what I wanted to find out from you is I assumed the entire time that they were flashbacks because of the way that he's introduced. And I thought it was so freaking smart that they almost tricked me into believing that they were flashbacks because because you assume, okay, all this stuff is going to come out in the wash. Sometime amongst this whole night of them
that will
dancing,
become pertinent.
You're going to discover that he killed somebody.
Because we've been learning things about everybody else the whole time and learning about their background, so it seems only appropriate with this guy we really know almost nothing about that's his thing.
So did you assume they were flashbacks as well?
I did.
Okay. I didn't know if I was crazy and dumb and was like, no, they were clearly flash forwards. So I wanted to ask you that because I once that became clear, I was just like, they didn't lie to me. The filmmakers didn't lie to me, which is always great when you watch a twist.
Yeah.
The filmmakers didn't lie. I just made assumptions based on the way that movies are made.
I think about halfway through it, I started questioning whether it was before or after. But then I was like, well, wait, if it's after, I mean, there was a fucking dance contest. Why would he be in jail?
Yeah.
You know, and when you find out, you're like, oh, fuck.
Well, they even tip their hand because he wears the shirt of the person who ends up being the sponsor. But even that, I was like, it's going to pay off in some way. Like, because you assume her showing up and sponsoring him was some tie to what you were already seeing anyways.
Right.
And so even then it quote unquote tricked me. I just thought that was so masterfully done because the movie was ahead of me. I was not ahead of the movie.
Agreed. All right. Well, that wraps up this episode of Digital Noise. John, you want to tell people where they can find you again?
You can find me at Golson, Gholson. I write for movies.com, but rather sporadically I cover the Marvel stuff over there.
Okay, cool. And I will be back. Actually, we should have, I believe there'll actually be 2 Digital Noise. This is going to be out, I'm going to put this out on Monday, and there'll probably be another one coming out either Tuesday or Wednesday with Joe. But after that, it's going to be a good over a week before you'll get one because I'm going to be at Fantastic Fest, and that's just going to be, that'll be all I'll be doing basically during that time. But thank you so much for listening, and let us know if you have any comments or thoughts. We always want to hear your point of view on things and to tell me when I'm totally full shit, because I often am.
Oneofus.net has been your one-stop shop for all things geek for years. But there's a side to them many of you have never heard. The subscription side. Subscribe and listen to great podcasts like The Breakfast Pub, The Original Gentleman, and the Watch a Movie With Us series. Head on over to oneofus.net and don't forget your towel.